Hello, this is Dr. Kingston, and in this video we're going to be talking about the accessory structures of the integument, meaning the hair and the nails. So we have a few learning objectives for this video because we'll be talking about a couple different things. We're going to start off talking about how these specialized epidermal cells are able to create these accessory structures of hair and nails. And then we'll talk a little bit about the anatomical features of each of those. So we'll look at what goes into making a strand of hair and what goes into making your nails. All right, before we start, I just want to do a quick review of the epidermis for you here. So I want you to recall that the epidermis is composed mostly of the keratinocyte cells. They form into 5 layers based mostly on appearance, and they undergo a growth cycle beginning down here in stratum basale, and they are pushed up and begin dying off until they reach stratum corneum, at which point they are basically empty cells that have been filled with the keratin protein. Okay, and again, this takes about 4 to 6 weeks for this entire lifespan to pass. Now, hair and nails grow from little pockets of the epidermis that have kind of folded in on themselves down in toward the dermis, like you see here in the picture. Okay, and because they are growing from the epidermis, they are growing from the same types of cells that are already in the epidermis, mostly keratinocytes. So hair and nails, we can both categorize them as very densely keratinized accessory structures because of this. Okay, so what happens here? We've got the epidermis, and it's going to kind of fold into a little pocket here, but it's going to continue to divide. And as it's continuing to divide, all of those cells are going to push toward the center, and that is going to result in the structure that's made being pushed out toward the surface of the skin. So here, this looks mostly like a hair, but it's also very similar to the way the nails are going to grow. All right, so let's talk about hair first. Hair is a long protein filament. So these are lots of keratinized epidermal cells that are stuck together and strung out into a long string by extracellular proteins. Why would we want something like that? For insulation mostly. So having these hairs helps prevent body heat loss. They are also very good for sensation. So their roots, this region down here, are going to be heavily covered by nerve endings. So give your own hair a little yank and just confirm that for yourself. And they are also for protection. They can catch particles, dust particles, allergens. This is especially evident in like your eyelashes or your eyebrows, but also, also inside your nose and around your genitals. Hair grows as part of a complex, which we call, again, the pilosebaceous apparatus. So pili meaning hair, sebum from oil, pilosebaceous. And these, of course, in addition to having their own little oil gland, are going to have a little erector pili muscle that is associated with them as well. That erector pili muscle is what is responsible for, just like its name says, making those little hairs stand up on end. Okay? And this assists with the thermoregulatory function of of the hair. So do me a favor, a little experiment here, and just blow across your skin real fast. Hopefully you felt that air moving across your skin was colder than the air that was just kind of stationary above it, right? That's a convection current, so that's pulling heat up from your skin from the air moving across its surface. When you have hairs covering up a portion of the skin there, they block some of that air movement and stop that convection current from stealing your body heat. By taking these hairs then and pulling them straight up, like you see in the picture here, you go from having an air current block of about that big to one that is about that big. So it is able to keep a thicker layer of dead or unmoving air close to your skin. All right, the hair itself has several different regions and layers. So as far as regions go, the cutoff is the layer of epidermis itself. So we have the hair shaft here above the skin, and below is going to be the root. If we are to cut one of these strands right down the middle to look at a cross section, we get this picture right here. The outermost layer is the cuticle, which is a single layer of flat keratinized cell. They look like shingles on a roof. They kind of overlap each other and close off the hair shaft to anything else. And this, if you take a look here, is not going to extend all the way down here into the bulb. Instead, it's going to be contiguous or runs right into one of our root sheaths. The middle layer here then is going to be the cortex, and these are kind of long cells that contain pigment. And just like the epidermal keratinocyte cells, these are going, the pigment here is going to be melanin once again. All right, and then our deepest layer is going to be the medulla, and the medulla is full of irregular shaped cells that also have some pigment. All right, so that's the hair itself. The hair grows inside that little pocket of epidermis, and that little pocket that we see here is going to be the hair follicle. So hair is the thing you can pluck out. The hair follicle is the pocket that surrounds it inside the skin. All right. So the purpose of this is simply to support and protect hair as it's growing. It is once again separated into a couple of different layers because we love layers in anatomy. Okay, so we start labeling these by their proximity to the hair shaft itself. So our inner or internal root sheath, it's the green here, okay, that is sitting closest to the cortex and medulla here, and it is part of the hair matrix. External to that, the outer root sheath is derived from stratum basale. So that is, here is our epidermis up here where I'm drawing. You can see that that's dipping down here, and that's continuous all the way down. That is going to turn into the external or outer root sheath. And finally, outside of that, you have what's called the glassy membrane. This is the basement membrane of this strip of epidermal epithelium here that is connecting the root sheath to the dermis itself. So if you've ever gone and like plucked out a hair and looked at the root end of it, you notice it's got kind of a white covering on it. That's that glassy membrane that you're looking at. All right, and finally then we have the dermal sheath, which is just referring to the little bit of dermis here that surrounds the hair follicle itself. At the deepest end of a shaft of hair, we have the bulb. The bulb is a swelling that is due to cell division taking place. Okay, so this is the part of the hair where the hair grows, where cell division is happening. All right, all cell division here happens in the hair matrix. So that is this yellow portion right here. You can see it all over there. And that is going to have its cells dividing and pushing outward and upward into the shaft of the hair. The matrix itself, so again this yellow layer, is where melanocytes sit in the hair follicle. So melanocytes are going to push pigment into the hair shaft at this place. All right, at the base of the bulb then, we have the capillary loop that is going to serve the hair matrix. Now I say very specifically it's serving the hair matrix and some of the follicle skin here, because once the hair is, about here, all of those keratinocyte cells are filled with keratin, and they're no longer functioning cells. But down here, where these cells are dividing, they still need to be supplied by blood. So we have a capillary loop coming up into that little hair papilla. Hair grows in 3 phases. The longest period is a growth phase or anagen phase, and this can last anywhere from 2 to 7 years. During this period, the matrix cells are dividing and new cells are constantly being added down here at the base of the root, okay? These cells then rise up and are pushed out into the shaft of the hair, and they stop dividing and they die. All right, so after 2 to 7 years here, it's very variable, that hair follicle will enter into the catagen or the regression phase. And this happens over a very short period in comparison, just a couple of weeks, where the hair matrix stops dividing. So all of those germinal cells no longer split up, and the follicle begins to atrophy. So all of this starts to collapse in on itself. Following that then, for the next couple of months, the hair enters into the telogen or resting phase. And during this time, there is no new growth, and the follicle itself continues to regress. The hair that was growing here will be pushed out from the root. This is typically when you start to find them around your bathroom floor or in your shower. And eventually, a new bit of hair will start to grow there. Hair comes in many different colors, and just like with the many different shades of human skin, the pigment responsible for this is once again melanin. So we have melanocytes living in the hair matrix, and they are going to be depositing little packets of melanin into the cells of the hair. Okay, so they're deposited specifically in cells of the medulla and the cortex of the hair. The thing that gives hair different, I should say, there are 2 things that give hair a different hue, okay? So number 1 is going to be the ratio of melanin type. So once again, we have eumelanin, which is a brownish black color, and pheomelanin, which is that yellowish red color. So if you were to have more eumelanin than pheomelanin, you would have black or brown hair. If you were to have more pheomelanin than eumelanin, your hair would be blonde or red. No melanin at all gives you white hair, which eventually we all end up with just through aging. So during the human lifespan, the melanocytes in the hair matrix begin to decrease in number. Okay, and eventually you don't have any at all for a specific hair follicle, and the hair begins to grow in white. Without that extra pigment there, the air spaces in the medulla also begin to increase in number, which begins to refract the light. So your hair not only turns white, but it turns sparkly white, so everyone is sure to notice it. All right, I mentioned earlier that nails are going to grow in a very similar manner to hair, and that's exactly what we see. So we have this little infolding of the epidermis, and we have the nail structure growing out from the middle of those. There are some important differences here, though. So number 1, nails are extremely dense keratinized epidermal cells. Okay, they're similar to the stratum corneum cells, but they have much harder keratin. They cover the distal ends of our digits, and they are homologous to claws and hooves found on other animals. Okay, so these are always very hard structures. We have them, number 1, for protection against mechanical stress. So you can go ahead and just press on the end of your finger and watch all the blood blanch out from underneath your nail. It should turn white or pink. Having that hard backing allows you to exert a lot more force with the tip of your finger than you would be able to if it were not there. And this is very important when we are manipulating small little objects, you know, as humans like to do. We like to build things, we like to do fine motor motions. And having these hard backings on the ends of our digits allows for that. When we talk about the anatomy of the nail, the term Nychium comes up a lot, and it just means nail. The nail is going to include all of this. So nail is that whole thing. It has a root that is tucked under the skin here. So there's our nail root down there. And it has a free edge that sticks out beyond the edge of the digit. So this will vary in length from person to person and from day to day, depending upon when you last cut your nails. All right, nails are going to, once again, grow from their matrix. And once again, just like with the hair, the matrix derives from stratum basale. Here, we can see some of this down here, but it extends a little bit farther forward in the nails. So that matrix will extend all the way up underneath what's called the lunula. Now the lunula is just this little white crescent moon shape here. That's where it gets its name from, because it looks like a crescent moon. And that's a little plate that hides the blood vessels that are supplying the matrix here. Okay, so from that matrix, the nail will grow distally like so. Okay, it is bounded on either side by the lateral nail folds. So that is just this fold of skin here and there. And it's held in place by a little fold of stratum corneum over the top called the eponychium, or the nail cuticle. If you've gone for a manicure, they usually take this and kind of shove it back down into your skin. So that is the eponychium, meaning over the nail. We also have the hyponychium, meaning under the nail. So eponychium is what's holding it down from on top. Hyponychium is this little piece of connection here that holds the nail against the tip of the finger. All right, we're going to wrap this up with one last question. Melanocytes live in which layer of a hair follicle? And that is the matrix. So the matrix is where all cell division for hair growth happens, and the melanocytes there are going to pump little bits of melanin into those cells as they divide. And that brings us to the end. That is the end of the integument section. So thank you for joining me all the way through.